The night sky above the alien planet was alive with colors. Strange blue lights danced across the horizon, and the air hummed with energy. Captain Daniel walked carefully along the edge of a glowing river, his boots sinking into the soft ground. He had traveled across many worlds before, but this place felt different, dangerous and ancient. The river was not made of normal water. It shimmered with silver light, currents flashing like lightning under the surface. Daniel had already been warned by his scanners. The water was deadly, full of unstable energy. One wrong step inside could burn a man alive in seconds, and yet, as he walked, he suddenly froze. Through the sound of rushing water, he heard something else. A cry, faint, weak, but filled with fear. It was the sound of someone drowning. Daniel's eyes scanned the glowing river. At first he thought it was a trick of the light. But then he saw her. A figure thrashing in the water. Silver hair spread, out like a halo, her arms fighting against the deadly current. Without thinking, Daniel dropped his pack and ran. The ground shook under his boots, every step echoing in his ears. He knew this was madness. Jumping into a river that could kill him in moments, but he also knew one truth. If he did nothing, she would die. He leapt into the water. At once the energy burned against his skin, 1,000 sparks racing over his body. His chest tightened as if the river itself was trying to crush him, but he forced his arms forward, pushing against the current, fighting to reach her. The alien woman's eyes were wide, glowing faintly with silver light. Her lips moved as if she was praying or begging. Daniel grabbed her arm, the shock nearly knocking him unconscious, but he pulled with all his strength, dragging her toward the bank. The current tried to pull them back. The water screamed with living energy. Daniel's muscles burned, his lungs felt ready to burst, but inch by inch he pulled her closer. At last he reached the edge and threw her onto the ground. He collapsed, beside her, coughing, his body trembling from the river's power. The woman lay still for a moment, her chest rising and falling. Then, slowly, she opened her eyes. Her eyes glowed brighter now, silver and deep like stars. She looked at Daniel, as if she saw something more than a man. Her lips parted, and in a weak, broken voice she whispered, "You saved me. Now fate has chosen you." Daniel frowned, his breath still heavy. "What?" he asked. But she had already fainted. Her head rested on the soft ground, silver hair spilling over her shoulders. Her skin was marked with strange, glowing lines, as if her body carried the same power as the river. Daniel looked around nervously. The night had gone quiet, too quiet. It felt as if the planet itself was watching him. Every shadow seemed alive. Every whisper of wind carried hidden meaning. He leaned closer to the woman, checking her pulse. She was alive but weak. He wondered who she was, why she was alone in a place like this, and what her strange words meant. "Fate has chosen you." Then the sound came, a deep horn echoing through the forest. Daniel stiffened, his hand moving to the small weapon at his side. The sound came again, closer, louder, carrying power. And warning, shapes moved between the trees, tall figures armored and strong, their weapons glowing with the same silver energy as the river. Daniel's heart raced. He realized he was no longer alone, and whoever these beings were, they had seen what happened. The alien warriors stepped into the open, surrounding him. Their faces were hidden behind masks of stone and metal. Their spears hummed with deadly power. One of them looked at the unconscious woman and then at Daniel. The leader raised his hand, voice deep and commanding. "Human," he said. "You have saved the daughter of the High Seer?" Daniel blinked in shock. Daughter of the High Seer? He had no idea what that meant, but from their tone it was something very important. The leader's voice grew louder. "By our sacred law, she now belongs to you." Daniel felt the ground turn cold beneath him. He had come here for exploration, for knowledge, not for this. But the eyes of the warriors burned into him, and he realized one thing. His life had just changed forever. The night air grew heavy. Daniel stood frozen, his heart pounding as the circle of alien warriors closed in around him. Their armor glowed, with faint silver veins, as if the same living energy from the river flowed through their suits. Each one carried a spear, sharp and humming, ready to strike if he made a wrong move. The woman he had rescued lay on the ground beside him, unconscious, but breathing. Her silver hair shone in the moonlight, her strange markings glowing softly against her skin. The warriors stared at her with respect, and then at him with suspicion. Daniel felt the weight of their eyes pressing against him like invisible chains. The leader stepped forward. He was taller than the others, his armor darker, carved with symbols that pulsed faintly with light. When he spoke, his voice rumbled like thunder. "You have saved the daughter of the High Seer." Daniel swallowed hard. He had no idea what that meant, but from the way the others lowered their heads when the title was spoken, he understood she was not just anyone. She was someone of great importance, someone sacred to them. The leader pointed his glowing spear at Daniel's chest. "By our sacred law," the warrior declared, "her life is now bound to yours." Daniel frowned, the words echoing in his mind. "Bound to mine?" He whispered under his breath. The warriors around him struck the ground with their spears, the sound like rolling thunder. It was not a threat. It was a ritual, a declaration. Daniel felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard many strange customs across the stars, but never one like this. He raised his hands slowly, trying not to anger them. "Listen," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I only saved her life, nothing more." But his words meant nothing to them. The leader's silver eyes glowed brighter as he stepped closer. "To save a life," he said, "is to claim a life." Daniel shook his head in disbelief. "That's not how it works where I come from," he muttered. But the warriors did not care about where he came from. They spoke in sharp tones, their language a mix of growls and echoes. Though Daniel could not understand the words, he understood their meaning. They were announcing something, a ceremony, a law, a command from the past. One of the younger warriors glanced at Daniel with hatred, his grip tight on the spear. Daniel realized the danger. He had broken no law of his own, but here among them he was already trapped. They believed he had stepped into a bond he never wanted, a bond that was not only sacred, but unbreakable. The unconscious woman stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, and she looked up at Daniel. She saw the circle of warriors, the glowing spears, and her face filled with both relief and fear. In a faint whisper, she said, "They will never release you now." Daniel leaned closer. "What do you mean?" he asked, but she only shook her head weakly. Then she closed her eyes again, too tired to speak further. Her warning hung in his mind like a shadow he could not escape. The leader raised his spear again. "You will come with us, human," he commanded. Daniel clenched his jaw, his instincts screaming not to trust them, but he looked down at the woman. She was helpless, and leaving her behind was not an option. Two warriors stepped forward and lifted her carefully. They carried her as if she was royalty, their movements respectful and cautious. Daniel noticed how the others bowed their heads as she was moved. She was not only important, she was sacred to them. The leader turned and gestured for Daniel to follow. The circle of warriors tightened around him, forcing him to walk. The forest ahead glowed with strange lights, vines that pulsed like veins, trees humming with energy. Every step Daniel took felt like he was walking deeper into a trap. As they moved, whispers traveled among the warriors. Daniel could not understand their words, but he could feel their emotions: suspicion, anger, even fear, all directed at him. He had entered their world not as an explorer, but as an intruder bound by their laws. At last, they reached a clearing. At the center stood a massive stone gate, covered in glowing runes. The warriors stopped, raising their spears high, their voices chanting in unison. The ground vibrated, the gate pulsed with light, and slowly it began to open. Daniel stared in awe as the gate revealed a hidden city. Towers of crystal and stone rose into the night, connected by glowing bridges. Streams of silver energy flowed through the streets like rivers. The city pulsed like a living heart, every building alive with power. The warriors led him inside. Every alien they passed stopped to stare, their glowing eyes following him. They looked at him not with welcome, but with judgment. He was the outsider who had touched the High Seer's daughter, the outsider who now carried her fate. The leader stopped before a massive hall of stone. He turned to Daniel, his voice heavy with finality. "From this moment, your life is no longer your own." Daniel felt the weight of the words crush down on him. He looked at the unconscious woman one more time, her face calm now, her breathing steady. He had saved her life, but in doing so, he had chained his own, and deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning. The city glowed like a living dream. Strange towers reached into the sky, humming with light, and streets pulsed with silver energy flowing like rivers. Daniel walked in silence, surrounded by warriors who kept their spears close. Everywhere he looked, alien eyes followed him, some filled with awe, others with open suspicion. They entered the great hall, its walls carved with shifting runes. The air was thick with incense, glowing smoke drifting like ghostly hands. At the center of the hall lay the alien woman resting on a crystal bed, her body surrounded by soft waves of energy. Daniel stood nearby, guarded, watching her chest rise and fall. He felt trapped, his fate sealed by a law he didn't understand. He had crossed many worlds, faced dangers beyond measure, but never had he been bound by someone else's traditions. He wanted answers, and more than that, he wanted freedom. But for now, he waited, his eyes fixed on her still form. Then, her fingers twitched. Slowly, her eyes opened, glowing silver pools that shimmered in the dim light. She blinked, breathing heavily, and then focused on Daniel. For a moment, her gaze softened, as if she recognized him beyond sight. "You," she whispered, her voice weak but steady. "The human who pulled me from the river." Daniel nodded slightly, unsure what to say. "I had no choice," he replied quietly. "You would have drowned." Her lips curved faintly, almost a smile. "You risked your life in the cursed waters," she said. "Few of my own people would dare it." Daniel frowned, his curiosity pushing through his frustration. "Cursed waters?" he asked. "What is that river?" She looked away, her expression shadowed. "It is the Veil River," she explained softly. "A place of death and trial, touched by the ancient gods, none may cross without permission." Her voice trembled, though her eyes remained calm. "To fall into it is a death sentence, yet you, a stranger, entered and survived." She studied him carefully, as if trying to see what lay beneath his skin. Daniel shook his head, still not understanding. "I didn't survive because of power," he said. "I survived because I refused to let you die." The woman stared at him in silence for a long moment. Then she whispered, "That is why the bond has chosen you." Daniel sighed, his jaw tight. "Everyone keeps saying that," he muttered. "Your people, your leader, now you. What bond? I never agreed to this." Her silver eyes softened, almost sad. "You saved my life," she said. "In our law, that means my life is now tied to yours. I am Liara, daughter of the High Seer, and by law, I belong to you." The words hit Daniel. Like stone, he stared at her, struggling to understand. "I don't want ownership," he said firmly. "I don't want anyone to belong to me." Liara's voice dropped, quiet but sharp. "You do not understand," she said. "It is not about what you want. It is about what the law demands. If you reject it, the clan will see it as dishonor, and dishonor brings blood." Daniel clenched his fists. So saving her life had not only trapped him, it had also painted a target on his back. Already he could sense the weight of watching, eyes warriors ready to challenge him. Liara sat up slowly, her silver hair falling like waves of light. She placed her hand over the glowing markings on her arm. "Do you see this?" she asked. The markings pulsed faintly, beating like a second heart. Daniel nodded, his brow furrowed. "They glow stronger because of you," Liara whispered. "When you touched me in the river, something awakened, something I cannot explain." Her eyes locked onto his, intense and unyielding. "My people will see this as proof that fate itself has bound us." Daniel felt the ground tilt beneath him. He wanted to deny it, to walk away. But the truth was clear. Whatever happened in that river had changed her, maybe even changed him. He remembered the sparks on his skin, the burning energy that should have killed him but didn't. "Why me?" he asked quietly, almost to himself. Liara shook her head slowly, her voice carrying sorrow. "Because the bond does not choose wrongly, and once chosen, it cannot be broken." She looked away, as if hiding her own fear. At that moment, heavy footsteps echoed through the hall. The leader returned, flanked by warriors, their eyes sharp and filled with judgment. He looked at Liara, then at Daniel. "It is time," the leader declared. "The human must face the trial of acceptance." Daniel's heart pounded. "What trial?" he demanded, though deep inside he already knew. The leader raised his spear, voice echoing like thunder. "To keep what fate has given, you must prove your worth, before the clan, before the gods, before the law." Liara turned quickly, her face pale. "No," she whispered. "He is not ready. He will die." The leader ignored her, his gaze fixed only on Daniel. "If he fails, the bond ends in blood. If he survives, he becomes one of us." The hall erupted in chants, the warriors striking their spears against the ground. The sound shook the air, filling Daniel's chest with dread and fire. He looked at Liara, who met his eyes with both fear and hope, and in that moment, Daniel understood. He had no way out, only forward. The hall trembled with the sound of chanting. Warriors struck their spears against the stone floor, each strike echoing like thunder. Daniel stood in the center, surrounded by glowing eyes and unyielding stares. The leader raised his hand and silence fell, heavy and sharp. "The trial of acceptance begins," the leader announced, his voice deep as stone. Daniel clenched his fists, his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't understand their laws, didn't believe in their gods, but he knew one thing. If he refused, he would be executed where he stood. He had no choice. Two massive doors opened at the far end of the hall. From the darkness beyond came a roar, low and guttural, shaking the very walls. Daniel's instincts screamed at him. Whatever waited inside was not meant to be fought. It was meant to kill. The warriors parted, forming a path. Daniel was pushed forward, his boots scraping against the smooth stone. He glanced at Liara, who stood to the side, her silver eyes wide with fear. She mouthed words silently to him, her lips forming a warning. "Survive." The gate slammed shut behind him. Now he stood inside an arena carved from living rock. Torches of blue fire lined the walls, casting long shadows. At the far end, a heavy cage rattled, its bars glowing faintly with energy. The chanting outside grew louder. The leader's voice cut through the noise. "Face the beast," he thundered, "and prove yourself worthy of the bond." The cage split open with a crack of lightning. Out crawled the creature, massive and terrifying. Its body was armored with dark scales, its arms thick as tree trunks. 4 glowing eyes fixed on Daniel, and its mouth split open to reveal rows of jagged teeth. Daniel's hand went to his side, gripping the compact plasma blade he always carried. The weapon was small compared to the monster, but it was all he had. The beast roared and charged. The ground shaking under its weight, Daniel dived to the side. The creature's claws slamming into the ground where he had stood, he rolled and slashed with his blade, sparks flying as it scraped against the beast's armored skin. The creature barely noticed, swinging its tail like a whip. It struck Daniel across the chest, sending him crashing into the wall. Pain exploded through his body, but he forced himself back to his feet. The crowd outside roared, some cheering for his death, others shouting for him to fight. Daniel spat blood, his vision blurred. He knew brute force would not save him. The beast was too strong, too armored. He needed to think. The arena floor was scattered with broken stones and fragments of metal. Daniel's eyes darted around, searching, calculating. The torches burned with strange blue fire, their bases connected to glowing channels of energy. Running through the ground, an idea formed, dangerous but possible. The beast charged again, its glowing eyes burning with rage. Daniel waited until the last second, then rolled aside, grabbing one of the loose metal shards. The creature smashed into the wall, stunned for a brief moment. Daniel ran to the nearest torch, forcing the shard of metal into its base. Sparks erupted. The torch flickered violently. The energy channel beneath it pulsed brighter, sending waves across the floor. The beast turned, furious, stomping toward him again. Daniel pulled the shard free and ran to another torch. Repeating the act, the crowd grew louder, confused and restless. The leader leaned forward, watching closely. Liara's eyes widened with realization. Daniel was not fighting the beast. He was using the arena itself. The beast roared and lunged, but Daniel kept moving. He ducked under its claws, rolled across the floor, and stabbed the shard into a third torch. Now the arena pulsed violently, the blue fire surging higher. The energy channels glowed like veins ready to burst. The creature's scales began to shimmer, reacting to the unstable energy. It staggered, confused, its roar shaking with pain. Daniel, bleeding and exhausted, stood tall in the center, holding his plasma blade high. He shouted with all his strength, drawing the beast toward him one final time. The monster charged, every step quaking the arena. Daniel waited, heart pounding, sweat stinging his eyes. At the last possible moment, he slammed the shard into the fourth torch. The entire arena erupted in a flash of blinding light. The energy channels exploded upward, a wave of blue fire engulfing the beast. It screamed, thrashing violently, its armored body cracking under. The force, Daniel was thrown back, skidding across the floor, his ears ringing. When the light finally faded, the creature lay still, its body broken, smoke rising from its scales. Silence followed, heavy and absolute. Then the gates opened, the warriors pouring inside, their faces a mix of shock and disbelief. Daniel forced himself to his feet, every muscle screaming. He held his blade tight, refusing to fall. The leader entered, his silver eyes fixed on the human who had survived the impossible. He raised his hand and the chanting began again. But this time, it was not a call for death. It was recognition, respect, even fear. Liara rushed to Daniel's side, her voice trembling. "You did it," she whispered. "You survived what no outsider ever has." Daniel met her gaze, his chest heaving. "This trial," he said, "was never about the beast, was it?" Liara shook her head slowly, her eyes dark with hidden truths. "It was about you," she whispered, "about proving that fate did not make a mistake." The beast's body still smoked in the arena when the chants of the clan echoed like thunder. Daniel stood bleeding, his chest heavy but his spirit unbroken. The leader raised his hand and declared, "The human has survived. The bond is honored." The crowd roared, yet not all voices carried respect. Some carried hatred. Among the warriors, one figure glared at Daniel with burning fury. His name was Varrock, a seasoned fighter, broad-shouldered and proud. He had long desired Liara, the daughter of the High Seer. To him, Daniel was not a hero. He was a thief who had stolen what rightfully belonged to him. Varrock's hand tightened around his spear. His heart pounded with jealousy as he watched Liara rush to Daniel's side. She touched the human's wounds gently, whispering words only he could hear. That small act, that closeness, made Varrock's rage boil like fire. Later, in the shadows of the Great Hall, Varrock gathered with a few loyal warriors. The glow of the crystal walls lit their faces with pale light. "He does not belong here," Varrock hissed, his voice sharp. "He is weak, unworthy, and yet the law forces us to bow." His allies nodded, their expressions grim. "He beat the beast," one whispered. Though his voice carried doubt, Varrock slammed his fist against the stone wall, sparks flashing from his armored gauntlet. "The beast can be tricked, but fate cannot," he spat. "He is no chosen one. He is a liar, and I will prove it." They leaned closer, their whispers dangerous. "What will you do?" another asked. Varrock's eyes glowed faintly as he sneered. "I will lead him into the wilderness, send him on a mission he cannot return from, and when he fails, the clan will see the truth." Meanwhile, Daniel rested in a chamber carved from crystal, his wounds wrapped in glowing bandages that pulsed with healing light. Liara sat near him, her gaze thoughtful, her voice soft. "You should not have survived that trial," she said, almost in awe. "Yet you did." Daniel leaned back, his body aching. "Survival is all I know," he muttered. "I don't need your law or your bond, I only need to live." Liara's eyes darkened with sadness. "You don't understand, Daniel. The bond is not only law, it is destiny." Daniel turned his head, frustration heavy in his tone. "Destiny," he said bitterly, "is just another word for a prison." Her lips parted to speak, but before she could, the chamber doors swung open. Varrock entered, tall and commanding, his eyes burning with false respect. "The clan council has spoken," Varrock announced, his voice calm but edged with venom. "There is a task that must be done, and only the one bound by fate can complete it." Daniel narrowed his eyes, sensing the weight of the trap. Hidden in those words, what kind of task? He asked. Varrock smiled faintly, though it never reached his eyes. "A hunt," he said. "Beyond the city lies the hollow wastes, a land of storms and shadows. The council demands proof of your strength. Bring back the heartstone of the shadow." "Beast." Liara's face went pale, her voice sharp. "No, that is suicide. No one returns from the hollow wastes." Varrock turned to her, his tone mocking but respectful. "Then the bond will break, and the human will be free of our law. Is that not what he wants?" Daniel studied Varrock carefully, reading the hatred beneath his mask. It was clear, this was no test of honor. It was a trap designed to kill him. But Daniel's pride burned. He would not let Varrock see fear in his eyes. "Fine," he said firmly. "I'll go," Liara gasped, her hand gripping his arm. "Don't," she whispered urgently. "This is his plan. He wants you dead." Daniel met her gaze, his voice low but steady. "Then I'll just have to disappoint him." Her eyes filled with worry, but also with a spark of admiration she could not hide. Varrock smirked and bowed mockingly before leaving the chamber. The moment he was gone, Liara turned back to Daniel, her voice trembling. "You don't know what waits out there. Storms that tear the sky, creatures that live in darkness, and whispers that drive men mad." Daniel tightened the straps of his gear, ignoring the pain in his wounds. "Where I'm from," he said quietly, "danger is nothing new." Liara's voice cracked as she spoke. "Promise me one thing. Whatever happens, don't trust him, don't trust Varrock." Daniel gave a small nod, his eyes sharp with resolve. That night, the city gates opened. The wind howled as Daniel stepped into the wilderness, the hollow waste stretching out like a graveyard of shadows. Behind him, Varrock watched from the walls, a cruel smile on his lips. Soon, the human would vanish into the dark, and the bond would end in blood. But Varrock had underestimated one thing. Daniel was not just a man bound by law, he was human, and humans had a way of turning traps into victories. And deep in the hollow wastes, fate was waiting to test him again. The hollow waste stretched endlessly before him, a land of broken stone and shifting shadows, where lightning cracked across a sky without stars. Daniel pulled his cloak tighter as the wind howled like a living beast. Each gust carried sand that stung his skin. Each echo whispered of things unseen. Behind him, the gates of the alien city had already vanished into the storm. Ahead lay only darkness, silence, and the task Varrock had placed upon him, the heartstone of the shadow beast, they had said. But Daniel knew the truth. This was not a trial of honor. It was a death sentence. The ground trembled beneath his boots. Strange fissures glowed with silver light, and from the cracks came whispers, not words but feelings. Fear, hunger, anger. Voices of the hollow itself. Daniel pressed forward, his eyes sharp, every muscle tense. Hours passed, or maybe only moments. Time twisted strangely in this place. His body ached from wounds still healing, his mind weary from the endless storm. And then, he heard it. Footsteps, heavy and deliberate. Daniel spun, his plasma blade humming to life. From the shadows emerged Varrock and his loyal warriors. Their silver eyes glowed with cruel amusement. Daniel's grip tightened on his weapon, anger rising in his chest. "So this was never about a beast," he said coldly. "You came to finish me yourself." Varrock laughed, his voice deep and venomous. "You learn quickly, human, but not quickly enough. No outsider can claim Liara. No outsider can take what belongs to me." Daniel's jaw clenched, his voice sharp. "She doesn't belong to anyone." Varrock's smile twisted into fury. "She belongs by law, and law is everything," he growled. He raised his spear, its tip glowing with silver fire. "Tonight the law ends with your blood." The warriors circled Daniel, their weapons gleaming. The storm raged around them, lightning splitting the sky. Daniel's heart pounded, but his mind stayed clear. He had been in ambushes before, outnumbered and outmatched, and he had survived. The first warrior lunged, his spear cutting through the air. Daniel twisted aside, his blade slashing across the attacker's arm, sparks flying. Another came from behind, but Daniel ducked low, driving his shoulder into the man's chest. The warrior fell back, but more pressed forward, relentless. Daniel fought like a cornered wolf, his movements quick, desperate, clever. But there were too many, each strike wearing him down. Varrock watched with cruel delight, waiting for the moment to strike the final blow. "You fight well for a doomed man," he sneered. Blood ran down Daniel's arm, his breath ragged. He blocked another spear, but the force drove him to one knee. Pain shot through his chest where the beast's tail had struck him days before. His strength was fading, and Varrock saw it. The rival warrior stepped forward, raising his spear high. "This ends now," Varrock declared, his voice echoing against the storm. Daniel tried to rise, but his legs trembled. For the first time since he had arrived, he felt the weight of death pressing close. Then a voice cut through the storm, sharp and fierce. "Enough!" The warriors froze, turning in shock. From the shadows stepped Liara, her silver eyes blazing, her cloak whipping in the wind. She raised her hands, the glowing markings along her arms pulsing like fire. "By the right of the High Seer's blood, I forbid this," she shouted. Her voice carried the weight of law itself. The warriors hesitated, caught between their loyalty to Varrock and the sacred bloodline. Varrock's face twisted with rage. "You should not be here," he snarled. "You break the law by speaking for him." Liara's gaze hardened. "Then let it be broken," she said, "because I will not let him die." Energy flared from her. Markings, silver light exploding outward. The storm itself bent to her will, lightning striking the ground between Varrock and Daniel. The warriors staggered back, fear flashing in their eyes. They had seen Liara's power before, but never like this. Never so raw and furious. Daniel forced himself to stand, his blade still in hand. He met Varrock's eyes, his voice steady despite his wounds. "You wanted me dead. You wanted the law on your side, but she chose to stand with me." Varrock's jaw clenched, hatred burning in his gaze. "This is not over," he growled, his voice low and dangerous. He motioned for his warriors to retreat, the storm swallowing them as they vanished into the shadows. But his final words lingered like poison. "I will return, and when I do, no law will protect you." Silence fell, broken only by the wind. Daniel lowered his blade, exhaustion flooding his body. He looked at Liara, her silver eyes fierce but filled with worry. "You should not have come," he said weakly. Liara stepped closer, her voice soft but unshakable. And let you die alone? Never. For a moment, the storm around them seemed to quiet, as if the hollow wastes itself bowed to her words. Daniel met her gaze, and for the first time, he understood. Their bond was no longer just law, it was choice. The hollow wastes fell behind them. Daniel walked with heavy steps, his body aching, his clothes torn but his spirit still unbroken. Beside him, Liara moved with quiet strength, her silver markings glowing faintly in the night. The storm that once raged around them had calmed, as if even the wastes respected what had just happened. When the gates of the alien city opened, the people gasped. They had expected Daniel to be nothing more than a body carried back in shame. But here he was, bloodied yet alive, and beside him stood Liara, defiant. Whispers spread through the streets like fire. The human had returned, and Liara had chosen him. The warriors led them to the sacred hall. At its center stood the High Seer himself, Liara's father, tall and robed in glowing silver cloth. His eyes were ancient, filled with wisdom and power. Around him gathered the council of elders, their expressions hard, waiting for judgment. Daniel stood tall despite the pain in his body. He felt their eyes judging him, weighing his worth, searching. For weakness, the leader who had announced the trial of acceptance before stepped forward. "Human," he said, his voice sharp. "You have passed the trial, but you have also broken order by walking into the wastes with her." Liara stepped forward before Daniel could speak. "It was I who broke the order," she declared, her voice strong. "I saved him from betrayal. Varrock sought his death, and I will not allow lies to guide this council." Gasps filled the hall, and anger flickered across the faces of the elders. The High Seer raised his hand, and silence fell like a heavy stone. "Bring Varrock," the seer commanded. Moments later, Varrock was dragged into the hall, his armor cracked, his face twisted with fury. He struggled against the guards, his voice venomous. "This human is no chosen one," he spat. "He is a curse upon us, a trick of fate, and I will not bow to him." The seer's eyes narrowed, his voice like thunder. "You speak against law, Varrock. You sought to twist trial into murder." Varrock snarled, his voice sharp. "I sought to protect us. The bond is a lie, and she belongs to me, not him." Daniel's fists tightened at his sides, his anger rising. But before he could speak, Liara stepped closer, her silver eyes blazing. "I do not belong to anyone," she said, her voice cutting through the hall like a blade. "I chose to stand with him, not because of law, but because of will." The hall erupted with voices, some shouting in anger, others in awe. The seer rose slowly, his presence filling the chamber. "Then it is decided," he said, his voice echoing. "The law has bound them, but now choice has sealed it. The human is accepted among us, and Varrock shall be exiled." Varrock's roar of rage shook the chamber. "You cannot cast me out," he shouted, his voice cracking. "I will return, and when I do, I will bring ruin to all of you." The guards dragged him away, his words echoing like a curse. Even as he vanished, Daniel knew this was not the last time he would face him. Silence returned, heavy with the weight of destiny. The seer turned to Daniel, his ancient eyes piercing. "You have walked into our trials, faced our beasts, endured betrayal, and yet you stand. Fate has chosen you, but fate is never gentle." Daniel bowed his head slightly, his voice steady. "I didn't come here to be chosen, I came here to survive." The seer's lips curved faintly, not quite a smile. "And that, human, is why you are dangerous, and why you may yet be needed." He gestured for the council to dismiss, but his eyes lingered on Daniel, thoughtful and heavy with meaning. Outside the hall, Liara walked beside Daniel in silence. The night sky above. The city glowed with countless stars, their light soft and endless. Finally she spoke, her voice quieter now. "You could have left. You could have rejected it all. But you stayed." Daniel looked at her, his face tired but unyielding. "I stayed because you risked everything to save me," he said. "Because someone has to fight when others choose betrayal." Liara's silver eyes softened, her lips curving faintly. Then perhaps fate was not wrong after all, she whispered. For a moment, the city around them felt calm. But Daniel's mind carried the weight of what had been said. Varrock's threat was not empty. The hollow wastes still whispered of darker things, and somewhere beyond the stars he felt destiny waiting with sharp teeth. As he looked at Liara standing strong beside him, Daniel realized one truth. His life was no longer his own. It was bound to hers, bound to this clan, bound to something greater, and though the trials were over, the real journey had only just begun.